Yes, I'm hiding in my office because my bench doesn't look as neat as yours.
Oh my God, do you see this? Kits, all the way up to the ceiling. More kits, paints in process. I got one drawer of Vallejo, one drawer of Vallejo Air, one drawer of my drawer of Tamiya.
That's far too organized. You are banned from the club forever.
They are Tamiya and tanks, and they are basically a remote control tank.
Hi, how are
Hello and
you?
welcome to the DAC origin story. I am joined today by former DAC co or XO. Is that what we called you?
Yep, co-founder
Retired
XO.
XO emeritus, retired XO Craig Pierce. We are both members of the International Plastic Modeler Society, Craig Hewitt chapter in Phoenix, Arizona. And we started this motley club in 2006
Six.
after a trip to Tamiyacon. Now, the way it started is one day in the meeting, we were just talking about the fact that Tamiyacon was coming up again, and people raised their hands. Who wants to go to Tamiyacon? And we kind of gathered off in the corner, and Craig and I introduced ourselves. And I said, seriously, just come with me. My sister lives in Long Beach. We can crash there and go to Tamiyacon. And Craig goes, okay, drive with a stranger in a car to California and sleep in somebody else's place. And anyway, so that's kind of how it started. And road trips are us. I made a little video. Anyway, so yeah, Craig and I go to Tamiyacon because amongst us, Craig is the more global modeler, I guess is the right word. I have two veins. Mine's the Navy airplanes and the tanks. And the truth is, naval airplanes are actually my favorite thing. To prove the point, right on my desk is my 21st Century Toys 1/18 scale Hellcat, if that shows up. That's funny, that doesn't show up. There you go. That show up?
Kind of. Yeah, it's getting lost. It's getting lost in the tank
Yeah.
behind you.
I
Yeah.
love I love Navy airplanes with folded wings. That's my thing. And the reason was my grandfather, Reuben Dunsford, was a lieutenant commander in the Navy. He served on carriers in World War II. As a matter of fact, he was on the Franklin when it was attacked and got the Silver Star for helping people that were wounded. I was building tanks on the side because of mostly when you bought monogram models, they came with Shep Payne's little diorama books. And the more I read the diorama books, the more interested in tanks I got. As a matter of fact, the first real model I ever got was the Tamiya Horch with the little flak, the 20 millimeter flak, the little kit they had. And that was in 1980. So the first model I got was a 72 snap scale B25, but that's another story. So the older I got and the more I moved around, you could still build a tank without an airbrush and an entire set of parts, tools, sandpaper, the whole shebang, and still get away with it. Your first inspirations were based on a lot of the Tamiya catalog stuff, right?
Well, yeah, it's kind of funny actually because I think I built my first model like in 1976. My mom was British. My grandmother and my aunt had come from England, and so for Christmas they bought me a couple of model kits. And both they were it was one was an International Harvester and one was the bicentennial Massey Ferguson tractors. They were farm tractors. One was in red, white, and blue. Like all kids, I slapped them together with some old, tester cement and didn't paint them or anything. and that was my, so I fell in love with model building, right? And so fourth grade, 77, fourth grade, I saw Star Wars, and I fell in love with models, right? Because I knew at that time, even in fourth grade, like, hey, these things don't exist, but that is so cool. So I knew like right then that's what I wanted to do. I had an aspiration to become a model builder. I wanted to work for Industrial Light and Magic. I was going to go into the movie build, movie models, special effects, that sort of thing. Um, and so I started just building all kinds of things. And I used to just buy whatever kits were available at my local drugstore. My dad would go down to the drugstore on a Sunday to pick up prescriptions or something, and I'd go with him. We'd pick up some kits. Well, flash forward, I was in seventh grade, so I'd have been, what, 12 years old maybe. And this kid comes into art class, a kid named Tom Pettit comes into art class, and he's got this little figure. And it ends up being the commander figure from Tamiya's 35th scale flak 8, they're 88 millimeter Pac 37 38, right? So it's the guy with the binoculars pointing. He's a very famous Tamiya figure. He has that. So what is that? He goes, oh, it came in a model kit that I bought. I said, what? Well, he had wood shop the period before we had art together, and he had this little figure, and he was using it to scale. He was building a watchtower as part of his wood project that he had to come up with for a class. So he just brought the figure in to scale the wood tower. I was like, that is so cool. Wait, they make military models? I didn't know this, kind of thing. Because the drugstore just carried cars mostly, maybe some planes. So there was a toy store in the mall at the time. It was called KB Toys, and they had pretty extensive line of Tamiya stuff.
Yep.
So I went there and I was going to buy this 88 millimeter kit. I wanted it, right? And it was 19.99. I had 20 bucks on me. Got to the register and realized that I didn't have enough to cover taxes, right? I was by myself. Parents weren't with me, so I was like, oh. So I went back, and on the same shelf, they had the Tamiya Rommel's Grief. There is little SDKFZ 251.
Yep.
And that was like I think it was 16 or 17.99. So with taxes at the time, it came out to $19 and some change. So that was the kit that I bought. That was the first Tamiya kit that I bought, and that started the journey for me. I think I built every single kit that Tamiya made from the North African campaign, British, American, and especially German. And I fell in love with the German stuff. I just like the shape. I like the color of it. I just like, the angular shape of it. It just looked more aggressive and meaner than the other stuff. And it just looked like it outgunned the British and American stuff. So that was my start into military modeling, right? And funny enough, right, I landed in, it's a whole nother story we won't go into, but I did end up landing in the movie industry. I did build models, special effects models, and professionally built models for a number of years. And everyone said, "Oh, it must be so cool. You're a model builder. You get paid to build models." And I said, "No, I successfully destroyed a hobby because I was doing it 40 or 50 hours a week for somebody else, building what they wanted, and not really what I was necessarily interested in. Right? It didn't really translate the way that I thought it would. Right?" So then, flash forward, I kind of got out of that as a profession, and I had moved away from Phoenix. I ended up landing back in Phoenix and had joined the IPMS club. I joined the IPMS Craig Hewitt chapter in 2002 because it was like the first time as an adult that I got kind of serious about the hobby. Right up to that point, I'd built models as a kid, and then of course life gets in the way.
Well, let's get back to our timeline real quick. So you're right. In '05, I went to go visit my sister in Long Beach. I stayed for a weekend. Tamiyacon was there. I went. The first day, true story. I went in. I was like you. I was in the model room, and I scoured the model room. They had real vehicles outside, so I got to climb on top of a Hummer with a tow launcher on it. They had a 7 ton and they had an Abrams, which they had to stay away from because at the point it had run, so the engine was still hot. 1,500 degrees, 700 degrees, or whatever it is the exhaust is. It killed a bush in the parking lot at Tamiya headquarters. So it was fascinating. I liked it. Went inside. They had the little Tamiya museum, so you see some of the stuff that they consider to be their greatest hits. And then there's Mr. Tamiya himself walking around, so it's kind of neat. Yeah. Then all of a sudden, but then I admit I got bored. It was noon, and I'm like, all right, what next? So then all of a sudden I hear the tank battle announcement on the loudspeaker, and I'm like, huh. So I go over, and they have an area. It's the side. It's near their track. So there's pictures of their big track they used to have. They used to hold competitions there. Well, next to it, they had an area that was about the size of a tennis court, maybe a little bigger, that they usually did like their rock crawlers, their buggies, that kind of stuff. That's where they tested it. And then, but the Scat Club was enlisted to build a field and make a demo. So we go out there, and lo and behold, there's this whole village, and there's this whole town, and there's trees and mountains and a factory with a tank in pieces. And you look at it, and you're like, this is awesome. Because the old message was, okay, you buy an $800 RC toy, put it together, and what do you do with it? You drive it, you chase the dog, you crush a can. I've told this story many times. But what do you do next? So the minute they do the announcement, good old Vince Hearn, the club president from SCAT, so Carolina Tankers, they do a demo, they do a battle. Germans on one side, Americans on the other, and eureka, they fight.
Americans, will you fire up your engines? Germans, start your engines. Okay, at the sound of the whistle, do battle. Now we see the Americans advancing through the forest to engage the Germans. Germans are kind of holding back. Kind of jockeying for position. The two types of German tanks that you see, the smaller German tank is the Tiger 1. It was one of the strongest tanks in Germany. It could take multiple hits and still keep going. The larger tank is the Tiger 2 or King Tiger. They were introduced at Battle of the Bulge. As far as the American tanks, we have the smaller one, which is called the Sherman. It was not well armored, but there were many of them. They outnumbered the Germans 3-1. But sometimes it took 3 to 5 Sherman tanks to knock out one German tank. The larger of the American tanks is the Pershing. Didn't come till the end of the war. Basically, we do this about 6 times a year. We have a battlefield in San Bernardino. This is a very, very good sport. We have a lot of, as you can see, we have parents and their young children that really love this. Usually it's the young kids that get involved with this, and what happens is his dad decides this is really neat to do, so anyway, he's got more money.
Russian newsreel pictures of the actual taking of Berlin have now been released. They show the climax of 8 days fighting in the German capital. Now, at last, the Red Army battles through to the very heart of the city. The climax of total German defeat is reached with the death of Berlin.
Just try it once. And they hand you a radio, and they let you drive a tank around, and you're hooked. So the end of that day, I paid my $20 and became a member of SCAT, and came back to Phoenix. And it just so happened, that was April. In May, I was covering the Suns on the road, and I made enough overtime to buy 2 tanks. So I bought a Pershing and a Sherman. Sherman first, of course. And as we tell the story in my last video, I decided to make my first tank into this and, went a little bit off the beaten track.
He brings this tank, right? And so, I mean, everyone in the club, there's a lot of plane guys, there's a couple of armor people, and at that time, the only thing I had seen, Ethan had built some modern. I was into World War II German stuff mostly, and he was into a lot more modern modern U.S. Military equipment. And he shows up with this tank. I'm like, my God, that thing is huge. Look at the size of that thing. And so the meeting started, the way the meeting started, like, the meeting would run its normal course, and then people would kind of taper off, and the evening would kind of wind down, and there wasn't as many people left, right? The meeting, like half the people that initially attended the meeting, someone had already gone home, and he fires this tank up, and he's messing with the turret or something, and all of a sudden, I don't know, it glitched or something, and the thing almost shot off the table, and I was like, holy crap, these
A-
things, like,
AR-600 receiver, remember?
yeah,
No failsafe.
right, right. So it was sitting on its tracks on the table, and it was like it shot. Someone caught it, didn't hit the ground, right? So then he finally put it on the ground. He starts driving around in the meeting room, and I'm like, oh no, wait. And he's like, oh yeah, wait, no, it gets better. These things you can fight with them. I go, how do you fight with them? He's infrared, and has the sound system, and it was like, okay, wait a second, that's pretty cool. Well, it was then right now like he was kind of hooked seeing the battlefield at scat like I'm envisioning and picturing this and by this point he's got videos or pictures he's showing everybody as well, and I mean I was like a true dyed in the wool, and I'd made some RC stuff when I was working in the movie industry. I'd made some RC aircraft and things, and so I was like, okay, like the technology is here, this is cool. And so, when we start now we start talking about, well, Tamiyacon's in a couple of months, because I think it was in April or May of 2006 as well. Like,
Yep.
and like, okay, well, it's not a far drive. Like, we can do that. And like Ethan said, like, fast forward, right? Here it is. It's 2006. He's talking about Tamiyacon. And at that time, for me, Tamiyacon was like, oh, that's the pinnacle of model building, right? You can go to Tamiyacon. Wow. Because I built all these Tamiya kits. And so I was specifically I started working on a diorama to take to Tamiyacon when he and I went to Tamiyacon. And it was funny if you remember, because you had gone in 2005, and so you'd met the guys from Scat. And so we landed Tamiyacon in 2006, and I'm just enamored with all the models on the table, and I'm just mulling around the room, and he's gone. I can't find him. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, "Man, what do you do? We're here at Tamiyacon, and you're not even in with the models, man. You're outside. I don't even think you took anything on the contest table that particular year. You brought your RC tanks, and so I finally, on day two, I kind of meandered out there and found him outside, and it kind of went like, oh, wait, these are cool. Like, you can build bigger models that you actually get to drive and play with after, and that, they're robust and you don't break them. And so, that day, and I think it was your Pershing, you're like, here, just try it. Like, you could run on the field. And the first time that I drove the tank, it wasn't even during a battle. It was like during the lunch intermission or something, because I'd never
Yeah,
driven an
no.
RC
They
tank,
were
right? So
there was
I
only
didn't want to
like
get
one
out
or
there
two
and,
set battles, and then in between, yeah, it was just
yeah.
noodling.
And
Yeah.
I didn't want to, I didn't want to go in there and embarrass myself and screw anything up, or mess up a battle for somebody. I was driving the tank, and like you said, it didn't take but driving the damn thing once. Like, this is like a huge diorama, and it's
Yes.
because I mean they did a really nice job of setting that field up, especially for a temporary setup. I mean, like you said, it had factories and buildings, and they had a fountain in the center, the street center with buildings that were around, and they had made their buildings all really really nicely done with shutters and windows and textures. Some of them were set like the buildings had been blown up and looked like they were partially burnt, and
Well, it's
it was
my
just,
favorite picture is the one where I purposely they actually had smokers in the middle of it too, and
yeah,
I drove Command Boy between those two buildings,
yeah.
and it was the classic picture.
It, wa-
Yeah, so that was really cool, and
it's
even
kind of it's
Ron
kind of
Baird.
like it's kind of like kids today getting immersed in the digital world playing video games, right? You kind of get so focused and engrossed in what you're doing that it feels much more real and completely submersive. It's funny, I do remember the trip back, driving back from Mission Viejo, California, back to Phoenix. It was probably the fastest trip because it's a blur. And what I mean by that is the trip went by so quickly because we were just so engaged in conversation, hashing this idea about, oh, we should start a club in Phoenix. And, Ethan already had plans to do all of this, and he's sharing his ideas with me. I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to get involved because, they don't really have the tanks that I'm interested in as far as like some of the German stuff. And they said, no, no, there's all kinds of stuff that's out there. So it started this whole, it really started like a deep, deep rabbit hole that spun up relatively quickly, actually. I mean, I was really surprised that the first tank I bought was a Tamiya Tiger One, and I was going to do that as a uh, Desert Tiger from DAC, from the original Dutch Africa Corps. And we kind of put the idea together, and we started putting things together, and all of a sudden the club came out of nowhere after we got back, really. And it was just Ethan and I and two other guys, a guy named Scott. He flew
Rescue
light flight
helicopters.
helicopters, and then another guy named Doug. And Doug Sharp, what a great guy. And anyway, yeah, it kind of translated to the very first battle that we had. We started building tanks, and Ethan had more than anybody. He was a little ahead of the game from everybody else. But our very first battle just was cardboard boxes. Didn't even have windows. We spray painted or drew some windows with markers and doors on just plain
Yep.
cardboard boxes and put them around the backyard and trying to learn how to drive, let alone how to fight or tactics or anything else. And it just kind of spun up from there. And we started talking about it, and I was like, well, and I had this envisionment immediately of, okay, well, if we build a battlefield, I want to do it right. Like that was my whole thing is I want to make it historically accurate. I want to make it like a scale model that's just been upsized. And we kind of that I think even in that car trip before we even made it back home to Phoenix, it was like we almost discovered like the motto for us was that we were going to try to build something that bridged the gap between the two hobbies, right? Because in the scale model world, it's all about accuracy and scale and detail and
Mhm.
making it look realistic. And in the RC hobby, it's really about creating something that is functional that you can actually battle with and it doesn't break every third turn. So we're like, well, we want to bridge that gap. We want to make runners that run well and operate the way they're supposed to and are functional that you can have fun with them, but still be detailed and realistic enough. And we kind of came up with the idea of, hey, we should build RC tanks that you can pick up off the battlefield and take into the model contest and put it on the table and still win an award because it's a good quality model, right? Like it could win, and I think you did that the next year, right? You took one of your tanks, and that was a daily
Hang
driver
on.
that you
You're
ran.
you're even forgetting the most important part of the story. You saw one of the members of SCAT reach down onto the field, pick up one of his tanks, walk it inside, put it on the table, and Mr. Tamiya gave him a medal.
You're
Because we're
right.
forgetting Tamiyacon's rules and judging were very particular. Mr. Tamiya himself walked around and said, that one.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're
And
right. And
so
I did, and I did. I
Steve
mean, and
Patton's Snow
I knew,
Tiger, very importantly, the Snow Tiger was the inspiration for the runner looker hybrid.
wasn't that patents?
That was Steve Patton's, yeah.
That was definitely a hook. I think that your enthusiasm and your excitement over it was just really exuded. And I mean, I was like, what I didn't think was possible, you made me believe, if that makes sense. I went from going, I don't know, to absolutely, let's do this in the car ride home. And I don't remember much of the car ride home because I don't think either one of us shut up for 7 hours. Like that's all that was the only topic of conversation was how
No,
do we do this?
we had a 2 hour conversation and had to make an L-24 gun on some sort of Panzer IV to make it into the D for you.
Right.
And that did happen eventually with the Henlong kit. But at the
Yes.
time, Bandai was it. And it was like, how
Yes.
do we do this? And I'm like, well, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And
Well,
yeah,
yeah, and
so
this is long before all the other electronics, the Clark boards and everything else came out, right? This is before all that, even before all the Henlong had released all the stuff that they had. I mean, this is
yeah.
long before all of that, right?
And the club still grew. We did some fun things, like we did that expo, and then we did the nationals that were here in Phoenix for IPMS. We had tables, and we always tried to recruit. And like I said, back to logistics. Our logo, the palm tree, obviously is based on the Africa Corps. The secret is, though, I based our logo by replacing the nefarious parts with the state of Arizona, not on the actual, Desert Armor Corps logo. I based or DAK logo. I based it on the U.S. Army. Remember, they had the cavalry units used to have the cross sabers under the palm tree. It's actually, if you go into the original Tamiya Bradley model kit, there's a decal in there that has that in it. It's when they were operating in Iraq in '91, they actually a lot of the units painted the cross sabers in the place of the nefarious logo in the palm tree. So I was sort of using that as my inspiration. I got one of the guys at work to make the art, and T-shirts and stickers and logos abound.
I actually thought it was genius because just the lettering DAC, right? And then it had a very recognizable logo because that's what the Dutch Africa Corps used was the palm tree, right? And just replace that with the state of Arizona. I thought that in itself because it was almost understated, right? It was like it didn't say Arizona, it didn't have the lettering, it didn't say AZ in the middle of it, right? It was just the outline shape of the state, which I thought was awesome. I honestly I give you a lot of kudos for that design because I thought it was great. But I didn't know that you had actually used like a US version of the palm tree, which is even kind of cooler, right? Because I mean, it makes it just even that much more unique and standalone for the club.
And of
So
course, I got the idea from a Tamiya kit. So there you go, full circle one more
there
time.
you go. It's almost like it was meant to be, right? Because I think some things just fell into place. Like, I mean, we didn't have many battles before we got a legitimate space to battle in. Like in your backyard with cardboard boxes, I think we had two battles. That was about it, right? And then,
I think the timing was we had our first event in October, and that was at my rented house over in
yep,
Arcadia. And then the second, we went to a California event, and
yep,
we had told all the IPMS people about it. And I think while we were at the IPMS event in November, Larry Grappentine called us and said his dad has a horse property he's not using. You want to use it? And we're like,
yeah.
okay. So that started Grappentine Field. So you're right. It was probably 3 meetings until we had a field.
It sounds crazy to say it now, but one of my fondest memories, honestly, in the beginning, and we used to refer to them as suicide runs, but like when we used to go travel, like we take our tanks and we drive over to California to go do the battle. We get up. I remember, we get up at 2:30 in the morning, get on the road, drive 7 hours from Phoenix to over to California, get to the tank battle, be there like, it's 9:30 in the morning, battle all day until 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They would usually grill or whatever, so we'd eat something there at the field. But then leaving, stop, get gas, get a bite to eat, and drive back home and get home at two, back at home midnight, 12:30. So it'd be like a 22 and a half, 23 hour day. And I can't even tell you how many times we did that. It was multiple times that we did those suicide runs where it was there and back in one day,
At least
and
between 6 and 10, we did at least that many.
yeah, no,
And
but it was so worth it. I tell you, the other
how about
the
the
other thing
fact
that
that we
sucked
made
me,
friends there and they came back to us? I mean,
yeah.
we
Well,
can't get rid of the Oozleys unless if we tried right now. We were just saying we had a very simple strategy: hide behind Amy.
Ready, let's go.
All right.
And I discovered very, very quickly, for me, one of the things that I liked was recording or documenting my builds, right? And sharing. And I loved actually writing those, making a post on RC Universe, share what I was doing. Here's photographs of my in progress. This is what I'm working on, detailed explanations, and then get feedback from other experienced tankers. And it really made it feel like a much closer knit hobby to start to befriend some of these other people that were, New York or down in the Carolinas or wherever they were, and of course, there's just like any other forums, right? There's people that were trolling out there who always had something negative to say,
And
and
we picked up a few trolls pretty quick.
yeah, yeah. But again, it was just one more facet of the hobby. And what I really found was for a number of years, I want to say from once I started, and like you said, solid in April of 2006. I don't think that I built static models probably for 4 years. I like it was fully immersive, like it was completely consuming, where any time that I had at my bench was spent on 16 scale RC tanks, and by that time, right, the club had started to form a little bit, plus talking to people over in California. And then I picked up a King Tiger that I bought, from someone used. And, it was like, oh, okay.
We had a
Well,
few battles that were very anemic. I mean, I remember the March 2007 specifically. There were only three of us there. It was you, me, and Dave Jones,
yeah.
one of our emeritus awesome members. And that was the day where you helped me buy a new car, and the whole joke was it had to fit the tank battle stuff we had.
Yeah.
So I traded in the Explorer Sport for the Escape.
We left that's right. We left the battlefield, went to the car dealership, right?
Yeah, and I had all the
Because at
stuff in
that
the
time,
car.
well, and just to explain that, at that time I was working for a bank doing auto finance, so I had a little bit more of exposure to kind of that industry, so I went with him
Yeah.
to
So that was funny. Imagine they actually came out and all the salespeople came out to take pictures with the load of stuff that we transferred from one car to another. And I drove that car for 17 years. So that's an example. I just traded it in 2 years ago.
Wow.
So for a Bronco Sport. So it's almost the same car.
That's what my wife has, Bronco Sport.
So we are, well, technically that's what my wife has now too, because I haven't seen that car in many months.
Oh,
We picked up a few new members, and then we did our first hiatus because you cannot battle in Arizona in the summer. And then we went to California a couple more times. And as we said, some of the California people who became the core members of our group started to come with us. We picked up Artie because we met him at Model Zona.
Yeah.
And that was one of the funnier stories. We were setting up, we brought our tanks, and I got the picture of the 5 tanks on the table. And Artie, they say, hey, you got to meet this guy. And in walks Artie, and he looks at our tanks, and he looks at us, and he goes, but mine's RC. And I reached into my pocket and I pulled out the apple and flipped it in the air. I'm like, so is ours. And he's like, I gotta join you guys.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how we found Artie.
Well,
And
that was that whole thing that we talked about, right? Making ours look more realistic, weathered, painted, camouflage, whatever it was. You add stowage to them, made modifications, the recoil, moving
yeah.
the emitter. I mean, all the things that we were doing where Artie was just straight out of the box, rattle can, spray paint. He wasn't a modeler necessarily. So
And the funny part about that day was that was the Saturday, and then the Sunday we went on. Model Zone was on Saturday, and we
yeah,
went to California Sunday morning. And I have the picture of us staying there in the middle of the battlefield with our medals that we won because we put it in a weird category and we got
yeah,
prizes. So that is an interesting. Yeah, Artie got the out of box because technically this was out of box, and you and
yeah.
I, it was in the scratch building and conversion
Conversions,
category.
yeah.
So that's why we thought it was funny. And boom, we have our models and we have our awards. So we have achieved, that was an early achievement. But one of the big trips was Anaheim was '07. So we brought a bunch of people there and they, most of you were models that day. And I did, there was a battle that happened to be the same week. So we also managed to make these trips sort of coincide. So it was worth the effort. Anyway,
It's
then
yeah,
we,
at the same time, we were really kind of spearheading building our own field, like trying to make it better, right? We discovered the whole
yeah,
buying Christmas trees after the holiday from Hobby Lobby or Michael's. They go in there and say, "Hey, how many you got left?" They have the little 18-inch tall miniature wire Christmas trees that look pretty good, but we'd actually plant them in the ground. And you and I were trying to come up with, "Hey, what are we going to do?" Right? We got
yeah,
LL Main train station. I made
yeah,
some bridges, and we
yeah,
really started trying to formulate what we wanted to have different sections of the field. We started doing night battles because of the heat. So, okay,
yeah.
what can we do for lighting? And,
And those things kind of, they kind of accidental. Most of the stuff was accidents that happened upon each other. We
yeah,
built our little buildings. We learned how to do them and learned how not to do them. I think we went from foam core to
sheetrock,
sheetrock
yeah, plywood, yeah, a
to thin
variety of different things.
plywood. It led up to when we did it. Actually, I brought my camera crew and we did a film for it.
They are Tamiya and tanks, and they are basically a remote control tank.
Welcome to Desert Armor Corps. We are an RC tank club.
We are having a reenactment tank battle.
As soon as I found out the Phoenix had a club up here that did RC tanks with the Tamiya, it's like, oh, I had to get involved in it.
And, we meet about every 6 weeks, unless it's really hot.
For my entire life, ever since I was a little kid, I've been big into model building. I think the interesting part, the intriguing part of this hobby was that when you're actually done building it, you can actually do something with them. They're more than a static model that just sits on the shelf and looks good.
So I went from spending $40 on a model to $600 to $800.
Doug is sniping from the trees. It's the Americans versus the Germans. The egg tiger is still helping us. Uh-oh, you're getting hit.
It's just fun to build them and then to test your skills, to learn new things.
The whole concept of these things, it's a 16 scale replica of a World War II tank. And you basically get to make a working replica of a World War II tank, and these things have full sound systems. They're run by a computer, so they are completely articulating. They have dual motor drives in them. They do everything that the real tank did, and because they're run by a computer, you also get, they actually have simulated battle damage as well. So if the tank gets hit, it actually starts to simulate. The tank takes damage, starts to act up, and so basically you can recreate or reenact a World War II battle. So it's kind of a cool thing.
So, like I said, we were into the phase of clubs always run into interference sometimes. And we've had a few stumbles here and there. We've had a few disgruntled members here and there. But fortunately, we've actually been very lucky in the association. I think the only injury we ever had was when Dave stepped on the nail. But
Well, and I'd say, I mean, the only one I remember is after my motorcycle. I do remember bleeding. It was kind of funny because I had my arm in a sling, and I just remember. I think it was Amy came up to me and she goes, "You're bleeding," and I was like, "Oh yeah," and because I had blown open the stitches, but I wasn't gonna miss. I mean, that was kind of a big deal. I mean, right? We only had one other thing that we kind of had done an expo for the public, and again, trying to introduce and show and showcase the hobby, right? So we were to. Because we really didn't even have a real battle. We were just kind of driving the tanks around and talking to people. But I mean, I thought that was a good opportunity for us to be good ambassadors for the hobby and,
It was
really.
good. Now we tried to do that a couple times, but it was always about logistics. So you go to these places and they'd invite you, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, but we want an insurance policy," or they
Yeah.
something weird would always pop up, and we're like, "Not a lot of danger here. Sorry, I know it says tank, but
Yeah.
you get more hurt feelings than you do hurt body parts." The the one that was sort of a bust was when we rented out the dirt track and did the battle at the dirt RC track place. They were kind of they were cool up front, but then they were kind of annoyed at us later because I guess they thought there'd be more throughput and there wasn't. So really nice facility, but they were upset because yeah, they lost a lot of practice time that day. But you're right, the one in here in Phoenix, we had a for a brief time we did some summer events at the converted Kmart that was turned into the track and the dirt track, but unfortunately that gentleman who ran that was it was a pipe dream to do that, and he
Yeah.
that didn't last very long. But that's the whole point. We've outlasted a whole lot of organizations and businesses that we've done business with before. The cool part of our hobby is, like I said, it still continues to grow even if we don't try, which is, I'm going to explain myself. I actually had to take a breather in 2021, 22 because I went to grad school. And, the whole part about life coming at you. When you started the club, you already were married and had kids. I
Yeah.
was still a bachelor, and at the time, yeah, I could put a lot of time into it because I had nothing but time. I had a crazy job, lots of weird hours, but it was it was my,
Soul passion.
it was a way to stay sane was doing what I was doing because there was a purpose. It felt like I was growing because I mean I learned about the websites and merchandising a little bit, and you realize that the hobby is never going to make money, even though you hope it will. But certain people try to make money off of a hobby, but it's sometimes you're like, eh.
As soon as you monetize it, you ruin the hobby side of it
So
anyway.
yeah, I mean, I know like right now, and over the years, it was interesting. I never really filmed or documented a whole lot of what we did, minus still photography and whatnot, because I didn't want to do my normal job as a hobby.
Right.
But now it's funny now that I've come after grad school and all these other things. I'm like, you know what? Documenting this stuff is actually we have something to document. We didn't really think about that. We actually been doing this for a long time. People actually know us, and it's kind of fun. Every now and then you do a Google search for something, and we're one of the first things that shows up. So it's kind of neat.
Well, I mean, right, not too long ago. Well, I say not too long ago, quite a few years ago now, right? I mean, you got contacted. There were some people interested from the Discovery Channel about maybe possibly doing a reality show on some of these
Yeah,
tank
they were
clubs.
talking about yeah doing like the junkyard wars, and they thought we'd be a good candidate for it. And we talked about them like, yeah, I can build you a great little tank that's this big.
Yeah.
They wanted real ones. But actually, I don't know if you remember one of those first scat battles we ever went to. The Discovery Channel showed up there. I think they were trying to come up with background stuff for Tank Overhaul, that TV show,
Yeah.
and they filmed some of the battle there. But no, people know us and they think we're cool.
I remember too, the lady just, we're like, there's just not that much drama in our club. Like we can't do reality TV. We actually all get along and we like each other. We all
Yeah,
have families. There's no,
yeah.
there's no infighting between us or anything.
Yeah, that's not really. I mean,
Like you said, mostly it's feelings get hurt. That's about it. People get over
yeah,
it.
yeah. My tank died. Well, don't suck at driving it.
Right?
That's basically. We have a great equalizer. Our fields were pretty rough,
Yeah. Well,
so
and let's talk about the field for a minute, right? Because I mean, we talk about. I mean, our club has had a little bit of diversity, or not diversity, a little bit of strife here and there, right? Because I mean, I remember having conversations. It was a very poignant conversation between you and I, because I got to a point where I was getting a little bit. I don't say disgruntled. I was a little bit frustrated because I felt like you and I had taken on the burden for the whole club. The club was growing. We were up over 40 members at that point, and we'd schedule like, hey, let's do a track maintenance or a battlefield maintenance day. And it'd always be always you and I. Even when you had to leave early to go to work, right? And the day we built the sheds, and you might get one or two other individuals that would show up, and you and I kind of got to a point where like we're talking about that, and you're like, hey, listen, people have lives, right? And we don't want to dissuade them from participating in the hobby. And I remember it was one conversation that I had with you and I was a real reality check for me. I started thinking about, like, I looked at the battlefield and I realized that without exception, every single tree on that battlefield was purchased by you and I. And every single building, with the exception of maybe one, at that point at least, was built by you or I. And there was two bridges at the time. I had built three. One of them was surviving at that point. One of them had been broken down or whatever it was. And then most of the battlefield elements that are on the field at that time
The
were
dragon's
built by
teeth, the barbed
were
wire.
purchased or built by you and I. And so we were there working on the field, weeding it, grading it, doing all the stuff that we do for track, for maintenance before like a battle season would start towards the end of summer. And I said to you, I said, hey, how much have you invested in this, And at that point, you had invested more than me. I think I was about, I don't know, $3,500 or something, $4,000 into the battlefield. Nothing to do with my tanks, just the field itself. And you were more than I was at that point. And I thought, wow, this is. I kind of felt like at that point, like you and I were both kind of carrying the load, of the whole group. We talked about it, right, extensively, right. And I got a little frustrated with that, and I was like, and at the end of the day, you're right. It's a hobby, and people can participate at whatever level they can participate. You don't want to dissuade them from coming out. But so I mean, I can understand why some of these other clubs might have had issues, right? Because I'm assuming this is just human behavior. It's part of having a volunteer club, run by volunteers, run by, people. Some people are more passionate about it. Like you said, right? When you started out, you were single and it was kind of a singular hobby. And for me, like when I first started, it wasn't. And it quickly
Yeah.
became like for a period of years, and then I actually found like I was kind of missing building some of the smaller scale static stuff, right? And then it was juggling both of those and other things, life,
Yeah. No, we
uh,
talked about it because the truth was, yeah, I got married. I started having a kid. My time went away, and I had a
yeah,
wife that very specifically said, "How does this benefit me?"
right.
Now, you look at it like, is that insensitive? I says, no, it's true. You have to juggle life. And if it was being juggled between 15 people, then it'd be easy. But if it's only two, it gets harder and harder. So
Yeah.
the other group people did step up. I mean, we had a member who showed up for a while and he built all those buildings and the barbed wire and some of the crazy traps and things like that. But then his health deteriorated and he couldn't participate anymore. So he disappeared. But and we've had people like John loved John Gibson. He made all those buildings to be the Russian factory. He started working with me, but then he had health problems and he had to sort of slow down.
Yeah.
And when I went, but that was the thing. We got into the 2020 era. I think you'd left at that point, and I had the same thing. We were moved. I think we were still at the second Craig's house, the first Craig Thompson house,
Right.
and it was the same idea. Was is he was working on the yard and he's looking at me going, why doesn't anybody come and show up and dig? And I says, now you know what I've been saying for the last 10 years.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, I mean, I can understand why it caused issues or strife in some of the other clubs that didn't maybe make it through. Which, and again, a lot of that's personalities, right? People who are willing to accept it or willing to, like you said, to have some people who step up and, even if there's an inequity in the amount of time or money or that people invest or participate in the hobby, it's almost like to me, it's like a relationship, right? Like you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be 100% equal all the time,
No.
right? Is and like we even talked about, right? Some of the members from SCAT who would drive over from California, you kind of give them a little bit of a pass. Like I don't expect you to drive from California to come pull weeds, right? You guys are already making a
Yeah.
bigger effort than some of the guys who live here locally that live 4 miles away from the field. Like you may and they were very consistent in making every single one of the battles. You know what I'm saying? They'd always show up and and we ran into issues, right, when we were doing our own little potlucks, right, where some people would, they're showing up with enough food to feed everybody, and other people show up like, hey, I bought a bottle of soda or I bought a bag of chips. It's like, and again,
Yes.
not to dissuade anyone from participating, but you do run into those, and like I say, I don't care what hobby it is, right? I don't care if you do trains or planes or RC tanks or static. I mean, you have those different levels of commitment and devotion to the hobby or to the club. And those are just human factors that you have to deal with. And sometimes it's challenging. So, I mean, I think it's a testament to you. I mean, because I'm gone now, right? I think when you and I started it, I think it was testament to what we wanted to do, like what we wanted to model and the way we wanted the club to run, that we
Yeah.
wanted everyone to feel welcome and participate, And like I say, it wasn't always easy, and sometimes I got more frustrated than you did. But I mean, that's why I think it's testament to you that the club is still going and that still the membership
Well,
still grows, and people pop in and out, and as life allows them to do so. So
no, we talked about this because at the time we used to kid each other because we actually remember the joke. We defined what a bromance was.
yeah,
We looked it up because it
yeah,
was, are you the last person you talk to at night? Have you
Well,
gone on a trip and stayed in the same like room or something like
well,
that? I
no,
mean,
that's what it was, right? So I saw a thing online, right? And it said, "What is a bromance?" Right? And I'm like, "Oh, this is it. To take the quiz." And it said they had this quiz. It was 10 questions. It said if you answered more yes to any, I think it was two or more of these questions, then you have a bromance. And I took the test and I answered yes, I think to eight. I think to eight of the 10 questions. And it's exactly that's what it was, right? Do you share a hobby? Is it the last person you talk to at night? Have you ever traveled or been out of town with this person? Have you ever shared a hotel with this person? Have you ever, I think there was something in there about purchasing something or them purchasing you something and, then like the money just went by the wayside. It was
yeah.
something to that effect, right? And, um, is it one of the first people you call when you're excited about something, And it
Yeah.
was like, yeah, I mean, like if I'm getting a new tank, you're the first guy I call. Like, hey, this is what I'm working on, right? And sharing pictures and all that. But it was just funny, yeah, because it was like if you answered yes to more than two, and I was like, I didn't answer no, but to two of them, right? So that's why I think
Yeah.
then I sent it to you. And I'm like, oh yeah, we're officially in a bromance
But it
here.
was just, but you're right. That kind of having that, I mean, two is a club. We can actually, we built off of that. Unfortunately, the reason I'm sort of joking about that is because, you did have family and kids and, had a daughter doing Junior Olympic softball and you had lots of other responsibilities, yet you still showed up. So that was the point that our club was pretty good, pretty solid in those years. And then we picked up a few other members that carried it over. And the example was is I was glad that happened because after had to go and you moved, I mean, he physically moved. So that's one of the reasons he left the office of XO. But
Yeah.
we picked up a new XO, Kenny, who's taken over. And when I had to leave, I was gone for like 3 years, and the club I had no idea if the club was running or not. And they took it over. They kept it running. The people still kept coming from California. And Greg Thompson stepped up, and they've been running the events for the last couple of years. Now, fortunately, I graduated with honors from ASU with my straight A's and my Masters of Science and Communications. But the idea is, yeah, now I'm the guy with the kid doing, step dancing and
Well,
lacrosse and all this. So my
right. And
time
I'll tell
is
you
so
honestly,
diverted. But the
right.
fact is, the club is still running.
Right, and to tell you the truth, right, even back in that time, like I say, whether it was like I say, after I wrecked my motorcycle and had plates and screws put in my shoulder, and I was standing there at an event bleeding, or I was because I did have kids that were active and stuff and had a family, and I still showed up. It was a lesson for me, right? Because I wanted other people to have that same level of commitment or same level of passion. My dad had told me a long time ago, he said, Craig, listen, you can't control what people think. You can't control what people say, and you definitely can't control what people do. The only thing you're in control of is how you react to that. Like, what do you do with it, right? When someone upsets you or goes against what you believe or does something different or doesn't show up or falls short or whatever. And I thought about that, and I'm like, who am I to place my expectations on other people? Right? Like because I show up doesn't mean someone else can. Doesn't mean they have the same support as their spouse. Doesn't mean that their job is as flexible. Doesn't mean they financially have the means to go out of town and travel to a or to spend money to buy additional things for the battlefield or for their hobby. And so it really took. I mean, it took me a little while, right? And I really had to kind of look inside and do some inflection and go, okay, look, what is it? What are you upset about? Like, I mean, are you really mad that people aren't as passionate about your hobby as you are? That's kind of dumb when you say it, you know what I mean? Another good friend of both yours and I, Tim Bongard, gentleman was very
Yep.
involved in Boy Scouts of America for a long time. He wrote a book, and it's a really really good book that he wrote, and it's all about trying to run a volunteer organization, right? Because these aren't people that are employed by you. These are not people that get paid to do this. This is what they're doing out of complete volunteerism, out of their own personal time. They're taking time away from their families or the other things, or life responsibilities. And that was a really, really good read for me as well because it brought a lot of levity into some of the challenges that we were having for the club. You
Well,
know?
I also look at the club as it's been a resource for so many things. We have people in our various clubs. I mean, we'll combine IPMS a little bit, but I've gotten to ride simulators at Luke because we knew the guy who ran the simulators at Luke. I've done multiple stories, lots of work connections because I learned about stuff. I mean, we literally have a rocket scientist, a Mikowski, who's going to come talk to my robotics team about space stuff. There's always it's the whole point is to build a community and a network. And guess what? They ended up being to your advantage. We've had lawyers, we've had engineers, we've had, and some of the people we listen to, remember Al, good old Al Flaff, he was actually in Iraq, so he can tell you, well, the tanks didn't do that because because of this. And you
Yeah.
have, Chris, the engineer, who's like, that's not how you mix concrete, Ethan. And we've had, oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember the names of all the really fun ones. But obviously, we go back to some of our basics, because some of the basic ones, some of our legacy guys are still around. I mean,
Right.
Dave Jones, he's been coming back and forth. Remember, he's the one who was the mad scientist to start us. He would come in with the little 18th scales that he converted into something that we didn't have, and that was he took what we liked and he actually manifested it. And now that we've got all the Andes kits coming out, you have a lot of stuff to do conversions with. I mean, the Achilles came out, and it's as if he was reading my dreams. Right now, we got to talk a little about future DAC. DAC actually looks pretty good right now. And as I said, we scored all those buildings. We've got a lot of new members. Some of them actually came from the Craig Thompson world. The RC drag car people and the rock crawler people. He's been converting them. Kenny's been getting a few people to come in because Kenny took over and he actually became the distributor for Clark Electronics. So he's an expert in that. We have two new members. One just came in and he is a 3D printing guru. He just totally all right. We've done a few videos. If you go back, you'll see 3D printed a weasel and came up with electronics for it. I kidded him about the tow variant, so he made a tow variant the next time. He just scratch built the tank that's supposed to be like. Remember we joked about the GI Joe tanks? We wanted to actually take the old Mauler and the old Mobat and turn them into vehicles. He said okay, and he made a Cobra tank just for fun. And now he invented a Russian MS-1 tank from World War II, and he's using magnetic plugs that connect themselves. It's just, the stuff he's doing is like, oh, we're into a whole new world now. We used to get excited when somebody came in with like a dozer blade. You get the Rich Johnson out of California and his convention, his conversions. But it's funny how we come in and everything's off the chain now.
Well, I mean, honestly, though, if you think about it too, right? I mean, even within the hobby, just within our club, I think that we had a lot of engineering type minds, right? And so, I mean, I think that our club was innovative in a lot of ways, right? I mean, like we were talking about just moving the emitter, right? So instead of having it mounted where Tamiya said, "Hey, here's this little clip that sticks out of the top of the turret," no, we put the emitter in the barrel, which gave you the ability to hide inside a building and still shoot, right? Or like you said, I mean, I know people, there were people removing the little cone out of the apple so they weren't taking hits. But I mean, I mean, there was other things, right? Like you and I, like, okay, look, you know what, this thing is molded like the Sherman, molded with hatches closed. Well, you come up with a methodology of using, just sewing thread as a saw to cut open the hatches to preserve as much of the plastic as you could, but then make make your own hinges, make working hatches, and stick the on-off plug so you don't just have a hole drilled through the side of the tank with a slide switch. It's actually hidden. Oh, well, okay, now I got to put magnetic closures. So I mean, there was a lot of that I felt like was really kind of cool innovation. I mean, I remember on my Sherman, when I did my British Sherman, I wanted to have a port, they had a grenade throwing port off the side of it, in that particular version.
Oh, you
Front
mean
there. So I mean,
the smoke launcher? Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, I just cut an oval through there, but then I took, soldering or solder and glued it around it, so it had a raised lip. It then used putty to flare it all out, so it actually has this nice, transitional raised lip around the outside of it. And then, we were playing with different textures. For a lot of the German stuff had cast textures, so we did cast textures and
Your textures were good, but ironically, one of your greatest contributions is when you actually took one of those K ration boxes and you made the actual K rations with the actual meals.
Yeah. But I mean that was real simple, really, right? I mean, but it was just a matter of looking at it and going, oh, okay. Same thing with ammo crates, right? You can just make an ammo crate that had the lid off, or the box was busted open. You could see something inside of it, To me, it was the battles. I mean, right? Because we had a battle about every 6 weeks or so, 5 or 6 weeks, we'd have a battle. And it was the battle created these deadlines that you wanted to get something done to kind of, preview it or premiere it out to others. And I was one of those ones. I never really liked bringing my work in progress, right? Like, I mean, I might bring, but if I was doing something special or unique or different that no one else had ever done, I'd want to wait till it was done and then plop it down on the table before he'd ran it on the field and go, yeah, there it is, done, right? That's just me, though, right? I mean, I know you brought a lot of stuff that was in process. A lot of people would, hey, this is what I'm working on, this is what I'm modifying, or I'm putting this on this or whatever. But I always liked waiting until it was done. And I have to say
talk is cheap, right?
Well, no, you know what it is? Honestly, I'll tell you the truth. That stems from when I was in college, right? I was going for my Bachelor of Fine Arts, at NEU, and twice it happened to me where someone's walking around the class looking at what everyone else is doing because they don't have an idea of what they want to do. They end up copying, and then they'd already seen the idea I had because someone else copied it, right? So I really don't like sharing my unfinished work. And that changed a little bit once we started doing articles. Like I said, I really liked getting the whole writing articles for RC Universe.
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as like presenting it, I'm like, you know what? I'll show you what the finished thing looks like.
After all these years, I still love to present like a converted model before it's painted to show all the different, subplots to the construction. It just reminds me of the fine scale modeler articles or stuff on missing links, all those old classic sites. In this hobby, there are the mechanics, which I consider myself, and they're the artists. I consider you the artist, which is why it used to be a good pairing. Because you know what? I'm never going to win the whole thing, but you know what? I'm happy I'm there.
But I think you sell yourself short, right? Because I mean, listen, I don't consider myself a mechanic, right? But I definitely feel like there was a certain amount of that mechanical or engineering side that I could take on and scratch build and figure things out. Like that was part of the fun, right? Was the puzzle of figuring out how to do this or how to make it work, right? Even though you may be more of the mechanical engineering side centric and focused on, right? I mean, your paint jobs and your weathering and your details that you add, and whether it's rusted exhaust or mud splatters and splashes, your tanks look more than fine, as is proof by you can downplay it all you want. It's not that you haven't won awards. I mean, you're more than an accomplished modeler within the hobby, both in static and in RC. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, your tanks are built rock solid. They run very, very well, and they still look better than 90% of the other tanks that are on this field at the same time. You know what I mean? I think collectively, and I think you're right. I think you and I did complement each other very, very well. Just our approaches were a little bit different, but at the end of the day, I think that we both were able to accomplish what you and I think our very original thing was, hey, let's bridge that gap between runners and lookers. And I don't know that many people do that. And I've been out for a little while now, right? But I mean, I don't know that anybody does it much better.